Welcome back. Welcome back to this, our 57th show. Thank you for joining us, wherever you're joining us from. We hope to hear from as many of you as possible over the next 45 minutes, hour. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Basil Al-Adraa and Yuval Abraham. Basil is a Palestinian journalist and activist, and he's a local resident of Masafer Yatta, where I believe you are now, Basil, speaking to us from the front line, as it were. Yuval is a journalist for 972 magazine, mainly covering stories of state and settler violence in the West Bank, home demolitions, and the numerous harsh effects of the siege on Gaza. He's an activist against Israeli apartheid and writing in Hebrew. Thank you both for joining us. Actually, I should ask you again, Yuval, just for the benefit of our viewers, whereabouts are you joining us from tonight?
So I'm actually joining from Beersheba, Bir Sabah, which is 20 minutes south of Masafer Yatta. So, yeah.
Well, thank you to us both, and also, for Basil too. I mean, there's been some quite personal, traumatic events affecting him and his family, which we'll begin to take a look at, because this is also very much through both the eyes of Basil and Yuval today. Basil, of course, has been he's been there as some of these incidents have been happening, as essentially people are evicted from their homes as soldiers come in, and indeed into Basil's own home. And I just wonder, before we start, because I wanted to, before we move on to the main business of the night, if you like, I want to know a bit. I'm sure our viewers will want to know a bit more about both of you and how it is that you came into activism and journalism. But before we do, this part of the occupied West Bank, isolated, it looks from anybody who doesn't know it rather desolate, but there are people living there for generations, and it's only in the last month that the Israeli Supreme Court has ruled that actually the people living there can be cleared away to make way for a firing range, an army firing range, something that Israel has been wanting to do for a very, very long time. This, as we say once again, is in the occupied West Bank. It's quite illegal what is going on. And I just wondered if we might begin by having a look at some of the footage that Basil has shot over recent weeks, including the incursion into his family home.
Us very brutally and attacking us as a journalist and activist who come here in Masafer Yatta to film the fake military exercise, just to evacuate the people out under the silence of the international community, who's doing nothing against this war crime that Israel is committed here in Masafer Yatta. Just to, they're beating now.
And I just thought we'd also, can we, if it's possible, see the footage of what happened subsequently with soldiers entering Basil's house. I mean, there we have it. It's difficult to imagine armed soldiers entering your house, but that's just what has happened to Basil and his family. Basil, can you tell us what was actually going on in that footage that you shot? What has been happening, and what has happened to your family?
Yeah, so I would like to start from the first footage that you showed when the soldiers were taking land, like beating us up and pushing us back. This is happened last Wednesday, when the army come to do military exercise in Masafer Yatta area. It's the first military exercise after the court decision have come out in the 4th of May, that the court gave the green line for the Israeli army to evacuate people and to do their military exercises in our communities. So it's just started last week, also today, and the army announced that it's going to happen for 1 month. During this military exercise, they're bombing, and today they were shooting. They come with tanks in the fields and next to the in the villages and next to the houses, next to the structure of the people, and no one is allowed from the Palestinians to move around the village or to go with the sheep outside. Or students have been today, for example, a student has lost his secondary school exam. He was prevented to come to his school. Other students got stopped also on their way. There's army checkpoints and soldiers' presence in the area all the time since this court decision. And the second footage about the army raid my home in the night. This is happening since February until today. At least 7 times the soldiers has raid my home, my family house. 2 times on these raids, my father was detained twice. I was beaten and attacked brutally while I was filming. Another Israeli activist were beaten also, and his camera were confiscated from him while we were together filming an army raiding to our village. They'd come to my home, to other homes in the village, make fake arrests, fake also research inside the homes, but all of it, it's like collective punishments for our activism as well. They bring soldiers to do training in the homes in the night. So when they go to the cities in the West Bank, they are trained in our homes. As well, last December and during these raids, soldiers raid my home and confiscated 5 cameras and 1 laptop, 1 car that I, alongside with other activists, use these cameras to document settlers and soldiers' violations.
So tell me, Basil, I think there are about 19 villages in the area, of which 12 are affected now by this court decision that is illegal under international law. Is the plan really to drive everybody who lives there out of those villages? And if so, where will people go?
So let's just go back in the history. So the area of Masafer Yatta, the people like my family and other families start to feel the presence of the Israeli occupation in the area of Masafer Yatta. It's back in the 80s when they come, and part of the villages, they start building settlement and bring in Israeli settlers and make infrastructure for them, water networks, electricity and roads network, as well digging our land to build homes for the Israeli settlers. So this violence to have presence of these settlers, because it means we lost thousands and tens of thousands of our dunums that our families using it for the agricultural work for the Israeli settlers to be living there. In the same year also, the occupation army decided and declared 32,000, includes 12 of our communities, as a firing zone area for the army to do trainings. And it's fake reason. It's just a reason to make us leave the land toward Palestinian cities in Area A, like Yatta and Hebron, and to leave Area C, where is our home. So in the 80s, they have this to declare our land as a firing zone. 85, 86, they demolished dozens and tens of our caves and homes in order to push the people to leave the land of Masafer Yatta. Until 1999, they did the first forest evacuation for the residents of these 12 communities. The army brought in trucks, picking up everyone, and the soldiers were taking everything for the Palestinians and the Palestinian people themselves by forest out of the map, where it tells for these soldiers that inside this map their firing zone, so they take them outside of this map without any alternative solution. So the people has set up tents, came to live in the communities that outside of the firing zone. For 6 months, people were trying to go back to work their land, to graze there, but a lot of them got catched and stopped by the soldiers, and they were sent to jail. Sheep has been confiscated, also tractors and anything were going inside there we got confiscated by the soldiers. After 6 months, the people went back to their land under temporary court ruling. Since they went back, they continued to fight in this legal battle until the 4th of May, until the final decision. And the people has brought every single evidence that they could to the court to prove they're like existing in these communities. Aerial footage from before the 48. A lot of evidence were there to prove, but the decision has come out that from the occupation court to the occupation arm, the green light to evacuate the Palestinians from this area and to do their military exercises as they want.
I'm going to just come in now, just to bring Yuval in, if I may, because you have been active and campaigning and reporting as well from Masafer Yatta. You've seen what's been going on over a long period of time. But for those who are watching who may not know as much as both of you do, I mean, what is the status of this area? When you talk about Area C and the Oslo Accords, what does it mean? And to what extent, Yuval, are people elsewhere familiar with what's happening? Are people in Israel, are they seeing footage from what's happening? What is the reaction? I mean, you're probably quite a rare voice, I would have thought, speaking out.
Yeah. So in regards to the first question about the legal status of Area C, basically, according to the Oslo Accords, Area C is under complete Israeli military control, which means, of course, the entire West Bank is under Israeli military control, but in Area C, the Israeli military is also the one responsible for civil things. So, for example, a Palestinian village living in Area C, if the residents want to get a building permit, to get a permit to construct a road, to connect to water, everything has to go directly through the Israeli military. In Area A, the Israeli military, of course, also occupies the territory there, but the Palestinian Authority is sort of like this figure in the middle between the Israeli military occupation and the Palestinians. In the C area, which is where Masafer Yatta is, it's more direct. Now, the C area is most of the West Bank. It's 61% of the West Bank. It's all of the open territory. So any Palestinian who is, for example, leaving his home in Ramallah, for example, in the A area, they have to pass through the C area. It's all the open land, all the natural resources, the borders, everything. And the Israeli policy towards the C area is to prevent completely any kind of Palestinian development. The statistics are really, really wild in this sense that for the past 5 years, while Israel has allowed, thousands of new units for settlements in the C area, it has approved less than 0.4% of Palestinian requests for building permits. So we have Masafer Yatta and almost 200 Palestinian villages who are in the C area, and it's impossible for them to live. They can't build anything. Anything they build is being destroyed. And it's really a brutal policy that is, fulfilling this vision of the Israeli government to concentrate Palestinians into enclaves. So they want to, it's a form of ethnic cleansing. They want to cause the Palestinians to be stuffed inside the Palestinian cities, while Israel controls all of the space around. And this is what's happening, I think, now in Masafer Yatta, and in a way, it's what's happening all across our region, from the river to the sea. It's happening in Jerusalem and in the Negev, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. And this division between A, B, and C was formulated in 1995 during the second round of the Oslo Accords, and it was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be only for a few years, but the Israeli occupation continues, and they're using this temporary state and making it permanent to basically for these colonial reasons. I think in the Israeli society, for your second question, is not hearing anything about this. And even if today the society has gone very much to the right, I think even if for many parts of the society, even if they hear about it, maybe they will be okay with it. Like they will. Even some of them will. I see a lot of times when I write about it or I post videos about this ethnic cleansing that's going on. A lot of the comments are actually encouraging it. Like okay, good. Like we will have more land. Especially comments from settlers who are in this area.
If I could follow up on that actually, because Graham in Manchester, he asks, Manchester in England, he asks, are Israeli settlers also involved? And are they causing trouble for Palestinians in the area as well as the military? And because, what flows from that question too is if you are just focusing on Masafer Yatta, if the excuse is the Israeli military need a firing range, how could they be allowing settlers to move into an area where it's going to be a firing range as well? Is this firing range just there temporarily to make room for more settlers to come in?
Mark, it's funny you ask this question now, because just yesterday I uncovered this document in the archives of a protocol of Ariel Sharon, who was an Israeli politician. He was the prime minister and the Israeli minister of defense, and he's the one who was involved in creating these firing zones in the West Bank. And in this protocol, he actually says, this is a direct quote now from him, he says, I declared these firing zones in order for there to be reserved territory for the Israeli settlements. For him, it was completely, of course, we know this, Palestinians know this, and it's very, very clear that it's a political tool by Israel. But, even he was saying it, like it's to almost 20% of the West Bank is a firing zone. It's clearly, this is not even I think for me, it's not even a debatable question. It's really an historical fact that this is not some military need. It's clearly a political tool to take over Palestinian land in the West Bank, and even the Zionist leaders who were talking about it, they know. And today, and this is something Basil can talk about also a lot, I think. But from what I see, and settler violence today is one of the main mechanisms that is actually supporting what the army is doing in Masafer Yatta. So on the one hand, you have the bulldozers who are destroying the homes, and the soldiers and the Supreme Court that's ruling to evict the people. On the other hand, you have settlers from the nearby outposts and settlements who are actually coming down to these villages and attacking residents. Me and Basil were together in November when settlements came in mass numbers, more than almost 100 settlers to one of these villages with clubs. They were masked with clubs and bats, and they started bashing all the cars and the homes, throwing rocks inside the windows. They broke the head of a 3-year-old child, got his skull fractured. And you see these different forms of violence that are supporting each other. So one violence is legal violence. It's like the military law doing the violence, and the other violence is illegal, but it's happening with the support of the law, and so it's this mechanism that's working together.
Yes. Well, thank you. And Basil, we've heard from an Israeli minister that this behavior by settlers is just totally unacceptable. It can't be allowed. But do you have any evidence to suggest that people who, because that incident that Yuval was just referring to, I mean, we had heard about that here. We had read about it. We had seen some of the footage. Have any of these people who perpetrated this violence on young people and on a 3-year-old, have they been prosecuted, to your knowledge?
Like this thing that you hear from the minister, or you read their tweets about settlers' violence, and they are condemning it. It's only happening on Twitter and on the media outlets, but on the ground, settlers' violence is growing and growing, and the state of Israel is investing it to ethnic cleansing us as Palestinians. They always want to show that these are a group of terrorist extremists, that they want to do violent, and the good state, the good government want to deal with that. But that's not true. It's settlers' violence. It's a policy that the state of Israel is using as demolishing our homes, as declaring our land as a firing zone. They're investing in the settler physical violence against us as a Palestinians in order to continue the mission to ethnic cleansing us from our. If the state wants to stop that, the state is working on bringing these settlers in. As I told you, they're demolishing our homes, but settlers are expanding and building new homes every day. They're stealing our land, expanding on it, getting all the infrastructure by the state of Israel, while we are who own the land, who own the evidence to prove that we own this land, are prevented to have infrastructure, prevented to build homes or schools or clinics or a good road on our land. But the settlers who own nothing, the state provide them everything in order to come and to live in this area.
Well, look, I mean, just if I could follow up with that, Basil, this is a question. This is from Julie, and she's in London. She says, solidarity. It's shocking what's going on. How many Palestinians currently face displacement, and how many have already had their homes demolished?
So home demolitions, to be honest, since I was young, since I start to understand stuff about life, I'm witnessing home demolitions. And I grow up, I learn how to use camera, and I start to document home demolitions. In the area, there's at least every week there's a mission of demolition of our homes, or bulldozing roads, or demolishing a school or a clinic. This is hundreds of homes have been demolished in the area.
In fact, I think we might have some footage of home demolitions taking place to share with you, to share with our viewers.
אתה מודע לזה שאתה נמצא בשטח אש? זה שטח אש 918, אתה משיג גבול, אתה לא תושב של האזור.
احنا 100 سنين انهينا على الفاضي بتغني بحالك مش راح نطلع
15 ילדים אילן גרים פה. אנחנו מבינים טוב מאוד מה המינהל האזרחי עושה.
That's very, very disturbing and dispiriting. And you just do sometimes wonder what must be going through the minds of some of the soldiers. I mean, really, if you're a soldier, do you really take any pride in knocking tents down and depriving elderly people and children of their homes? It's just staggeringly awful. But I just also I think we don't want to because I think we do want to try and focus on solutions as well. We don't want to just dwell on the terrible things that are happening. But I think whilst we're here, there's also we also have footage of passengers being attacked by settlers, car passengers being attacked by settlers in the area too. We'll have a quick look at that, and then I'll come back to.
Fuck! Oh my god. את בסדר? כן. זה היה הוא? פק, 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 פק! אומייגאד! 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 סעמק. סעמק. זה הרי שלא תתרסי אף אחד. את בסדר? נו. כן. כוס אמא שלהם. טוב, טוב, טוב. קצת סמכויות אני אשרוד.
Well, Basil took that footage, but I wonder if I could come to you, Yuval. The people who are being attacked there, they were activists coming to solidarity with residents there. What was actually going on there? Because I mean, the thing is that we, apart from when people like Basil manage to take footage like this and share it, we very rarely see this in the West. So can you tell us what's happening there, Yuval, with these? I guess the activists who come for solidarity reasons.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were three solidarity activists in the car, Noor, Yasmin, and Itai. And on that day, there was a solidarity protest with Masafer Yatta and with the ethnic cleansing that is happening there. And these are the settlers that attacked them. They come from an outpost that is illegal even under the Israeli law system. But of course, unlike Masafer Yatta, they're getting anything they want, water, electricity, whatever. It's complete apartheid. And I think also part of them are in the firing zone. So it's like really outrageous in this sense of two people who are right next to each other, but completely different set of laws and rules are placed upon them. And this is a very, very violent outpost that has been, we've documented many extreme violent attacks of the people who are living there. Before this, a couple of months before that, they attacked, I remember, a Palestinian family who was doing a picnic on their land, and they came down with bats and they crushed someone's jaw. Basil wrote an article about it in a 972 magazine, where we are both working as journalists there, and these settlers are really using, I think, and this goes back maybe to your former question also, Mark. Like, they know that they are immune. You can see in this actually a photographer, this guy who is breaking the window and injuring the people in the car. He's later seen talking to one of the soldiers. And then he is just walking back to the outpost, and you can see the soldier just looking at him and letting him go. Later, because of the media echoing of this incident, the Israeli police arrested him and then let him go like a few hours later. And I can tell you nothing will happen to this person. So they know they can do this violence and get away with it, because they are in a way helping the army fulfill what the army is trying to do. So they are just immune to these.
Well, I have to say that there was a program on the BBC the other day talking about home demolitions taking place in India, where Muslim homes and Muslim districts are being bulldozed down. The BJP, the BJP party, the Nationalist Party, in control of these state governments, are saying, well, we have to do this because these are people who are protesting. But actually, what I noticed from that report was there was no direct correlation being made between these policies that have been carried out by Israel now in the occupied territories for a very, very long time, and the fact that clearly, it's the same thing happening in India. It's almost like copycat. But look, before we move on, I just thought one other piece of footage that our colleagues have put together is of she was a former colleague of mine, Shereen Abu Akleh, who of course was shot dead. We know for sure by an Israeli soldier. The United Nations has conducted an investigation, as you know. Shereen, of course, was a journalist for Al Jazeera, has been reporting for 20 odd years from the occupied territories. And I think we have footage of her actually in the area from some years ago. So showing that this has been going on, as Basil and Yuval have been saying, for some time. If we could just have a quick look at that footage of Shereen, that would be fantastic.
أخرى تريد إسرائيل هدمها. الجزء الذي خلفنا يقع ضمن الأراضي المحتلة عام 67. هذه خربة جنب فيها مدرسة ابتدائية أنشئت دون ترخيص. لا أحد يلتفت إلى تلك الخرب باستثناء إسرائيل التي قررت هدمها وإخراج سكانها الفلسطينيين الممنوعين أصلا من البناء.
الخيام حتى أعطونا عليهن تبليغات.
في المقابل تحيط بتلك الخرب عدة مستوطنات توفر لها إسرائيل كل متطلبات الحياة.
المستوطنات الإسرائيلية عمالها بتتوسع على حساب الأراضي الفلسطينية.
لو تمكنت من طردهم ستؤمن لنفسها شريطا حدوديا بين الخط الأخضر وجنوب الضفة الغربية. شيرين أبو عقل، الجزيرة، الخليل.
Well, there we are, Basil. This and Yuval, this bears out what you've been saying. This whole process has been going on for a very, very long time. And I suppose a lot of people looking at that, Basil, will ask the question, if Palestinians have been driven out of their homes for such a long period of time, even before the court decision went the way of the government, what is it that makes people hang on in there, this tenacity? What is it that, because they are all this time, they still haven't succeeded in driving you away, then you're there right now, Basil.
Yes, I mean, first, because people don't have another home, another land to go live in. And this is the only land and the only home. It's not just a kind of structures and road and this kind of simple infrastructure that make the people live there. But it's a community with a whole tradition or the livelihood that Israel is trying to destroy. So that this is what makes the community steadfast and continue facing this harsh condition that the Israeli army putting us living in.
Right. I mean, the other interesting thing, of course, is that all of this has been going on against a backdrop of the international community saying this is illegal. I mean, very often things happen. And the reaction, as far as Palestinians are concerned, is very disappointing. But in the case here, the United Nations, the European Union just in recent days, once again reiterating these actions are being taken in breach of international law. And we've just heard from Yuval that there's almost a sense that, Israeli soldiers, Israeli military and politicians are untouchable. But I just wonder, I think we've got a bit of footage, actually a British minister who's just been there in the past few days, Amanda Milling, I believe. I haven't seen this clip, but perhaps we could share it and then we can see what she has to say.
In the South Hebron Hills with the Palestinian community of Masafer Yatta. In this area, more than 1,000 Palestinians face the threat of demolition and eviction from their homes. I met families and children living here, and it was really difficult to hear about the challenges they face, including settler violence and living in constant fear of evictions and demolitions. The people I've met today want to stay in their homes, and they should be able to do so. I had the opportunity to raise these issues with the Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister earlier in the week. The UK strongly opposes such evictions, which cause unnecessary suffering. Let me be clear, these evictions are against international law in all but the most exceptional of circumstances.
Yuval, here we hear, it's not often that you hear ministers from the West being so unequivocal, actually. It might have been different some years ago, but it's become more and more scarce. But in all of this, what do you think that the Israeli government, they have meetings with delegations, they're reminded by the UN, they're told by the EU, they're told by the UK that this is illegal. But does it have any impact? And for it to have any impact, what needs to happen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So no, there is no impact of these, condemnations that we hear every once in a while. And on the contrary, I think on the ground, the situation is getting worse for Palestinians, and the occupation is becoming more and more, enshrined as part of the Israeli system. And I think that what needs to be done is actual actions. We see the way the West has responded, for example, for the Russian occupation in Ukraine. And we know that there are, for me, as someone who lives here, who has Israeli citizenship, I believe that the West definitely needs to take concrete action in the form of, the numerous things that the BDS movement is suggesting, and to really make Israelis also feel that they're paying a price for this. I think, Mark, this connects to the first question on whether or not the Israeli society is hearing about this. I think in general, we had the Prime Minister Naftali Bennett speaking in the UN and saying the Israelis are not waking up in the morning and thinking about the conflict. And I think it's true. When you are oppressing another people in this way, many Israelis can not think about the conflict because they don't feel it. And I think that definitely the international community has to take concrete actions so that Israelis who are doing these war crimes should pay a price, whether it means even putting them on lists that they cannot enter freely European countries. The military officers who are doing these terrible crimes, why are they allowed to even enter Germany and all of these Western countries? I mean, really, they're doing war crimes, and just talking all of this talk, it really means almost nothing. Yeah. That being said, I think specifically for Masafer Yatta, even talk is almost non-existent. Unlike Sheikh Jarrah and unlike other places that are facing this process of colonization and ethnic cleansing, Masafer Yatta is less, I think, in the awareness of the international community. And I'm not even sure how much they are bringing up the name Masafer Yatta in these meetings they're having with the Israeli ministers. And it's important because this is making it more risky that the mass eviction will take place, because we are now seeing this gradual process of eviction, which is happening for many years. But now, after the court decision, the army can actually come with trucks, load up more than 1,000 people. We're talking about almost 3,000 people in the biggest estimation, and just evict them. So one of the biggest acts of expulsions since the 1967 occupation can really take place at any moment. We don't know when it will take place. Yeah. So it's really, really important. Yeah.
Well, look, before I go back to Basil, there's a question which I'd be wanting to ask you myself, but actually Mary in Stockport has put it in a much better way. Mary says, Yuval, why do you care so much about the well-being of Palestinians? What makes you so independently minded and unique among a population of Israelis who overwhelmingly seem to support right-wing parties, apartheid and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians? That's her question to you.
Yeah, so I can say briefly that for me, what changed, I studied Arabic, Palestinian Arabic, and the language really allowed me to, I think, see a lot of things that I didn't see before. And I feel a responsibility, this horrible ethnic cleansing that's happening in Masafer Yatta is happening in my name. Even if I'm not, it's the people who are enforcing it, the system. It's all a system that I'm a privileged citizen in, similar to the apartheid in South Africa. And yeah, I'm trying to use the resources that I have to maybe make a change and to influence. And I think it's important more people hear about Masafer Yatta and yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Yuval. This is a question for you, Basil. Now, this is a question that's coming in. Now, where are we? Yes, this is from Max, and Max is in London, in England. And Max says, Basil, your work on the ground is inspiring to all. I want to know, what help have you had from the Palestinian Authority? And have you felt solidarity? Have you received solidarity from Palestinians in Gaza? You'll have to switch your microphone on, Basil.
Yeah, solidarity from Palestinian and Gaza. And I think the Palestinian and Gaza need solidarity and need big support to get out from what they're suffering from. From the Palestinian Authority, I think they're working closely with the local council since this decision and giving sort of support to these communities. But that's not enough, and that's not helping so much this support. I think they should work more on the issue of Masafer Yatta, especially on the diplomats like level. Their like consulates should be working more on this issue of Masafer Yatta.
Yes, I mean, Yuval was making this point a moment ago about Masafer Yatta and the fact that we have seen some reporting, those of us who are following this, but we're not seeing this making the national news right across the world in a way that we are seeing events that are being played out in Ukraine. And that's another point that comes from tonight's show, and the one that we've been making actually as soon as the Russians invaded Ukraine, and we saw the response in terms of sanctions, in terms of the International Criminal Court being called upon to act by non-signatory members, as it happened. But we've drawn this direct parallel between an occupation in Ukraine and an occupation in Palestine that's continued for 50 odd years and isn't being sanctioned. So Basil, when you pointed to the support you're getting, but like Yuval, you must be disappointed at the fact that there's a kind of there seems to be a double standards at work here. One attitude towards the Russians and in other words to the occupation of the Palestinian lands.
Yeah, for us, we're really hurt by the hypocrisy of the international community that keep as Yuval almost said everything, keep condemning, sending out statements, and come taking video. Like this minister come today take a video, but now the army is doing keep doing the training and bombing in the area, and the facts on the ground are just created by the Israeli settlers and the Israeli occupation soldiers, who's the ones that holding the power to do whatever they want. And as I said, the US and the European Union specifically keep sending statements, and they're supporting the Palestinian rights and supporting the human rights, and settlements are illegal according to the international law, and the Israeli occupation is illegal. But what they have done to this, for me, it's nothing, because settlements are expanding. Our homes are being demolishing every day almost across West Bank. Settlers attacks have been increasing without any sanctions from this international community toward Israel. And I believe that if this international community is still interested in a solution to our facts as Palestinians, is they are the only one can do it through their sanctions and the Israeli authorities, so they can stop what they're doing. But coming to the area, doing videos and writing on Twitter, I don't know, writing statements to the Israeli authorities, this is not helpful. And the issue like Masafer Yatta and Sheikh Jarrah and Khan al-Ahmar, it's the basic thing this international community should do, is to prevent our eviction, and we should have master plans and building permission and live with dignity on our land with all life requirements.
Well, thank you, Basil. Actually, now here's a question I'll put to both of you, if I may. And this is from Farouk in New York. Starting with you, Basil. Basil, does all of this make you feel that the two-state solution is now dead? And should Palestinians be advocating for an equal rights approach now, a one-state solution to dismantle apartheid?
For me, I'll speak from my perspective and the perspective of the Palestinian living in Masafer Yatta. We are not a people who think about two-state solution or one-state solution, because we are living without any human rights. Our rights have been like damaged for years since I born and grow up here in Masafer Yatta. Has no rights, always homes under under the threat of demolition. So first, I think have to end this occupation and military occupation, because we're living under military control and laws that we don't choose. They are always opposed on us by guns, by military, by soldiers. So first, I think before getting to any solution or negotiate about any solution, should end this settlements and this military presence into our land and controlling our life.
Thanks, Basil. I mean, I think people can see that would be your most immediate and most important consideration, given that the rest of this might seem to be rather highfalutin, if you like. But actually, equal rights seems to be such a potent demand, such a basic human right. And so I'm wondering, Yuval, what about that? What about Farouk's question about the two-state solution being dead, and should essentially Palestinians and Israelis be advocating for equal rights? Equal rights. Should this really dismantle apartheid?
Yeah, I have to say, I have a few thoughts about this. The first thought is, I think one thing we have to be careful of, sometimes people who are supporting a one-state solution are in a way legitimizing a lot of the extreme settlements that have been happening, for example, in Masafer Yatta and on Basil's land, because they're saying, okay, it's the one state. So, and I think it's important that we notice that regardless of one state, two state, the settlers who are in the 67 occupation are a really big cause of the violence that is happening there, and I think it's important not to depoliticize this question. I think that, you know, another thought is that one state or two state, like the present reality is that Israel is not interested in a solution, and I think the reason Israel is refusing to make any kind of solution is because of the insane power imbalance between Israelis and Palestinians. Israel is so powerful. It's one of the strongest armies in the world. It's maintaining its occupation, as we've mentioned, with no international intervention or action against it. The Arab countries are, in a way, betraying the Palestinians and normalizing relations with Israel. So we are in this situation of an apartheid state that is really allowed, has the green light to use all of its power to conduct this system of siege on Gaza and of ethnic cleansing in the land. So in a way, this theoretical question of one state or two states, which is not unimportant, for me, the more important question, how do you close this power gap? And when you close a little bit of this power gap, maybe both solutions can work, but it's important to realize that I think the reason the two-state solution is not working, or the one-state solution, is not because there is something wrong per se in the solution, but because of this Israeli refusal and because of this power gap. That being said, after all of that, I still think that there is a lot of problems in the two-state paradigm. And I think that, you know, one of the problems, for example, is that it's completely disregarding the question of 1948, the fact that Palestinians are connected to the entire land, that there is a system of colonialism also inside Israel and you know, against the Palestinian citizens of Israel. And I think that, I'm not sure a one state, but I think in some way like a shared space with equal rights, maybe a confederation in the future is more close to the solution that I think is more just. But again, this is all theoretical talk. We are now fighting against the apartheid and the military occupation. This is a very concrete fight that it has different terminology than the ones of solutions, I think, for me.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, frankly, if it wasn't down to your work and the work of Basil, you know, showing us this material, getting it out, telling the story, we would be none the wiser, really, because, you know, what I've certainly seen in recent years is that Western media organizations have also cut back on budgets. There's far less available for reporters to go and cover stories such as this. And so what you're doing by showing so clearly what is happening, no attempt to downplay or to censor or to control. And with the shooting and murder of Shereen, for instance, a few weeks back, the work of the activists, the work of journalists in actually showing what had happened has been absolutely vital. And in a way, I suppose one area of hope from where we're sitting is that certainly as a result of all of your work, language has now entered the mainstream that wasn't there 10 years ago, such as apartheid policies, such as settler violence. And we now see from Amnesty International to the United Nations to the European Union, the adoption of what you see and experience every day. So look, I just wanted to, you know, unfortunately we're coming to an end. I just wanted to come back to you both for some final words. You know, Basil, Yuval, we're very grateful to you. Thanks for all that you are doing and what you're bringing and showing us and reporting on. But, you know, you're there. We've got a lot of people watching this. They'll see more of this over the coming days because we do have the power of social media now and we can't be censored. So, Basil, your last thoughts, if I may ask you, what would you really like to see from people in Britain, in America, elsewhere who might be watching this? What can we do?
I would like to see a lot, to be honest, but I would love to see people keep pushing their governments and to make Israel hand sanctions, to see solidarity, people protesting, keep writing and posting about Masafer Yatta, share our story is very important. We are working, as you mentioned, on the ground hardly to raise our voice to stop this thing happening to us, to our communities. So we'll be more than happy to see more and more solidarity from the internationals until to get the point to stop Israel from what they are doing.
Thank you, Basil. Yuval.
I can just echo what Basil said. You should follow Basil on Twitter also. He's always doing amazing journalism and sharing it there. And I want to say, you know, maybe as someone who is Jewish, that don't let, you know, there is a lot of smears happening of criticism against the Israeli apartheid being labeled as anti-Semitism or in some way being against Jews or against Israelis. And I think this is wrong. You know, really listen to your conscience, listen to your heart. This is apartheid going on the ground. It's very, very clear, and it's time to really take concrete action against it because we are really going down. It's deteriorating, and it's very, very scary. So yeah, and thank you, Mark, for hosting, and thank you, everybody.
Not at all, Yuval. And actually, thank you very much for your last statement. It's very, very important and powerful that because a lot of good people have felt quite intimidated when they're calling for equal rights and for justice to be accused of being racist or anti-Semitic or what have you. So we don't want any of that stuff. Maria Landi, what did we start to we start to thank and admire the miracle that it means how Basil has become a brave journalist and outspoken activist coming from the heart of apartheid and deprivation. So there we are. From Maria Landi, that's a message to you, Basil. Also, if you want to follow Yuval and if you want to follow Basil on Twitter, have a look there. There are the handles. So please do. Please keep in touch and support them in any which way you can. We here at Palestine Deep Dive are very grateful to Yuval and Basil for joining us. It's been a very, very important show. We appreciate it. And also thanks from our colleagues at Palestine Deep Dive who made this happen, Omar, Alex and Ahmed. So until next time, it's goodbye from all of us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.